that their business is falling. Like, they're worried about how they're going to pay their mortgage. This is going to have far more consequences than COVID. Like, yes, those deaths are sad, and we should be concerned, but we need to be concerned about everybody.
That was a Virginia protester from yesterday. Public backlash is growing over individual state stay-at-home orders, with more protesters expected today in Minnesota and Kentucky. However, just moments ago, Minnesota's governor just signed an executive order allowing some outdoor activities to resume: biking, golfing, fishing, easing up that stay-at-home restriction. And of course, 7 Midwestern states now have teamed up to coordinate how they will reopen their economies following similar agreements announced by states in the Northeast and on the West Coast. So you have that going on in those areas that have been more or less hit, depending on where you are in that configuration. Mike Tobin, live in Chicago with the latest on this. So Mike, in Minnesota, they got some results on the streets.
Well, they did get some result, and as the protest is forming up, Harris, let's see if the demonstrators are indeed satisfied with it, because the backbone of their beef is that they want to get back to work. But there is a demonstration forming up right now by a group called Liberate Minnesota. They couldn't even wait for their scheduled time. They demonstrated in front of the governor's residence yesterday. The group calls Governor Tim Walz's stay-at-home order an overreaction. An organizer claims that people are fed up with the lockdown and they want to get back to their jobs. But they did get some satisfaction. If you notice the common theme, what the governor is allowing with this executive order: activities that involve a lot of space, like fishing, like getting outdoors, like biking. But another demonstration sprung up in Richmond, Virginia yesterday, as they have all across the nation. The constant theme there is that they find the lockdowns to be overreactions, heavy-handed, and they want to be able to use their own judgment about what is safe.
Reopen Virginia and let people decide when they're ready to go do business. If they are not wanting to go out of their house, stay home, and I fully support that. Those of us who are healthy and want to get out of our house and do business, we need to get this going again. It's time.
Now, governors say they want to reopen state economies, and with statements that they want science and health experts to guide the decisions. Governors from 7 Midwestern states formed a bipartisan alliance. It includes Kentucky, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and Wisconsin.
Easing in sectors of our economy will be most effective when we work together as a region. This doesn't mean our economy will reopen all at once or that every state will take the same steps at the same time, but close coordination will ensure we get this right.
Now, President Trump weighed in just after 11 o'clock Eastern time, apparently in support of the demonstrators, with tweets that say liberate Minnesota, Michigan, and Virginia. Harris, back to you.
Well, you know, a lot of this is commerce, as you pointed out, and in the state of Minnesota, where they have all of those lakes, I mean, if you're going to open up areas outside, that does put some people back to work. So it has the added benefit, that executive order by Governor Walz, of doing that. You know, and we'll just watch it. Good to see you. Thank you very much, Mike Tobin. Meanwhile, just days after protesters surrounded Michigan's capital, that state's governor, Gretchen Whitmer, is now facing at least 2 federal lawsuits claiming her stay-at-home order is unconstitutional. Here's what the governor says her priority is.
All I ask is let's not get overly political here. Let's focus on the public health. I'm the governor for almost 10 million people. I represent and want to protect every one of them, whether they supported me politically or not, or they were even disengaged. That's my job, is to protect the people of Michigan, and that's precisely what I'm doing with each of these orders.
However, one local sheriff says parts of the governor's orders seem to go a bit too far.
It's not political, it's more common sense. Again, if somebody's out in the middle of the lake and away from everybody, or if they're on their lawnmower and they're 100 yards away from people, that's where we want them. We don't want them bottled up inside the house where they start arguing and start drinking alcohol. And I think that's reasonable.
I want to bring in now Fox News legal analyst Mercedes Colwin. Mercedes, first of all, let's acknowledge the change that's happening right now in the state of Minnesota. Sure. The governor listening to the people who were protesting on the streets and outside the state capitol. Is that kind of the legal recourse to all of this? You know, beat your feet on the pavement and let people know what you're thinking, or is there something more that they can do in the courts?
Well, I mean, that's great that the governor of Minnesota came forward and just looked at the circumstances practically. Having someone fishing in the middle of a lake is not going to communicate the deadly virus to someone else. So, and that's really the balancing test, that if this were to manifest into the court challenges, as you see already in Michigan, that's a balancing test. It's the individual's rights to assemble and to go outside and to live in the pursuit of their happiness versus the governmental interest regarding protecting individuals from this deadly virus. But that balancing test is very critical, and what the courts do is say we have to look at whether these regulations actually make sense. Does it further the governmental interest of stopping the deadly virus from being communicated to others? And that's why, frankly, that was really smart of the governor of Minnesota to come forward and say, I'm going to look at this at a practical level, and making this blanket, you can't leave your home under any circumstances, is not something that is sustainable when challenged in a constitutional challenge in court.
So, Mercedes, can we further that out at all when it comes
Sure.
to opening up the economy, where people are saying it's not just about their personal freedoms, but the one woman that we heard from a couple of minutes ago who was interviewed by our team, Fox News team, said, look, you know, she's got to be able to pay her mortgage, her rent. I mean, people are on the brink financially, too.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I mean, I'm a corporate defense attorney. This is a conversation I have every day with clients. It is very scary. And I was looking for a case that's pretty similar to the circumstances we have. The only thing I could come up with where there was a pandemic, there was this obviously very serious contagious disease, was a 1905 Supreme Court case. And in that case, it talked about the smallpox. And it said, yes, you have the right to go out, you have the right to live and to work as you will. But if the government wants to stop this contagious disease, in that case, it was a smallpox, they're permitted to do so. And I think this is what we're dealing with now. I think the courts are going to give a lot of latitude to governors who are trying to manage this deadly virus. They're going to say, look, you know, it's really up to them. They're trying to do their best. There is this overwhelming governmental interest to make sure that lives are saved. I mean, that tagline by the governor, it's better to be 6 feet apart than 6 feet under. I mean, that resonates. And it's something that the courts can wrap their arms around it.
Well, what also resonates is a conversation between those who are leading us and those who have voted on those leaders, and that's what you saw play out, at least in Minnesota today. Maybe it will, roll out in other places where both sides are listening. Fascinating.
No,
Mercedes, always good to see you. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Cyrus.
Did Joe Biden just have his own deplorables moment? His comment that some are saying reminds them of that one that Hillary Clinton made in 2016. The power panel slides in next.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Yeah, dumb bitch.
All right, a lot of governor news to pass around as we crisscross the states right now and how they're dealing with stay-at-home provisions. Some are easing up on them in Minnesota. The crackdown there that is, incited protests and the like, they continue today. Nothing that Governor Tim Walz proposed today is easing that. He's expanded a lot of outdoor recreational activities here and saying that right now these conditions are easing up, but the protests themselves are violating stay-at-home provisions. Those people are obviously a lot closer than 6 feet here. The governor is saying there's a lot more outdoor recreation guidelines that are being expanded that will provide more opportunities to engage, he says, in golfing and boating, fishing, hunting, and hiking. This apparently though falling on deaf ears among protesters who, much like in Michigan, are saying the crackdown has got to ease up. And so no indication out of Minnesota or Michigan yesterday that is the case. But they're obviously letting their impatience be known that they want much more flexibility and much more allowances on the part of the governor to open things up. Separately, I want to take you to New Jersey right now. Phil Murphy, the governor there, is saying that the increase of the coronavirus spread in New Jersey has dropped dramatically. I don't have the latest numbers out of the Garden State there, but again, That's what they tend to look at. Not that the cases are reversing, but that the rate of increase is slowing. And apparently, according to the governor, it has. Remember, New Jersey, like New York and Connecticut and Rhode Island and Delaware and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, they are not resuming activity or even considering doing so until a month from now, May 15th. And finally, in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott says that schools will remain closed for the remainder of the school year. Still, state parks will be opened. And separately, in the city of Jacksonville, the beaches are now open. They are watching for crowds. They're keeping it limited in large groups in an area to no more than 50 people on a stretch. I don't know what on a stretch means, but that if you want to go walking or jogging on the beach, you're free to do so, but in groups smaller than 10. So I don't know where the stretch of 50 comes from. It might be a reference to 50 yards and no more than 50 people in that group. I have no idea. What I do know is this back and forth is going to continue between the president right now and governors who he has charged with just doing whatever they think is necessary. But there's a battle ensuing right now, certainly with the governor of New York, over who's going to pay the bill for a lot of this, including more drug tests and the like. It isn't very, very clear where that is going. Jackie DeAngelis has been following this drama here, especially how they go about reopening things.
Well, it's a hard question, Neil. How do you reopen things, especially when every state is having a different experience, right? And that's part of the conversation that you're talking about here. The governor's mulling over their options. But I can tell you one big problem here in New York City is the restaurant industry and dining out. And they're starting to look at what solutions could look like. While many are looking to China, which is slowly getting back up and running, the picture is very different there than when things were normal, especially in restaurants. So look at some of these pictures we've got for you of Chinese diners. They are separated by plexiglass partitions. And we're wondering if that's what life is going to be like here. The tables wrapped in plastic, consumers doing temperature checks before they walk in. I'm wondering if I would even want to eat in a place that looked exactly like that. Restaurant owners have been talking about social distancing, maybe cutting some of the table numbers in half, for example, so people can have some space. But you wonder if it's worth even opening your business if you can be profitable under those conditions. The executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, he told us this.
So even if we are able to open fully, but we only have 50% of the customers we did pre-pandemic, most small businesses will not be able to survive.
Spoke to one restaurant owner in Manhattan who said, listen, I'm prepared to stay closed for a year because having 50% of the tables doesn't really make it worthwhile to open the restaurant, especially if all of a sudden people don't show up and sit at those tables. It's a valid concern. And the question is, what will that consumer appetite look like? The senior VP for the National Restaurant Association shared his thoughts with us.
I think the restaurateurs that I've talked to obviously are concerned about rebuilding confidence in the public. Is after you've been hearing stay in, stay in, stay in for so many successive weeks, it's overcoming that.
The stay in message is very powerful, Neil. We have all experienced it. And you do exhibit a little fear when you think about going to be in social environments and being around other people, especially regarding food where people have handled it, or silverware where it's a communal product. But the thing that we do know, Neil, is that this new normal is going to look very different.
It's not too different from me, though. Growing up with my Italian grandmother, she had everything covered in plastic, the furniture, even her grandkids. So there is that experience, but we're going back to the old days, way before your time, young lady. Thank you very much, Jackie. Great reporting, Jackie DeAngelis, on that. And she's right, it's going to be a lot to get used to. Meanwhile, I want to go to Chris Hogan, great, give her financial advice, Everyday Millionaires, the mega bestseller. But Chris, now we're hearing that folks who are depending on these checks or there are delays, there are snafus. A lot of it goes back to either the financial software they used to file their taxes or their accountants did. I don't know all the details, but they're getting impatient. What do you think?
Well, Neil, as we've talked about before, we've got 79% of Americans that live in paycheck to paycheck. So any kind of flaw or disturbance in the financial flow can cause some headache and heartache. And you're absolutely right. What we found here, the IRS has processed almost 50 million payments already. They still have a lot more to go. But for people that have used tax preparers, they're finding a new problem. If you've used H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt or any other tax preparer, people are finding out that their check is actually going there instead of coming to them. Now, the physical check isn't going there, but here's the problem. If you used a tax preparer, they set up an account for you to be able to get your refund and then take their fee out and pass your payment on to you. So the IRS does not have everyone's actual banking information. So I'm encouraging people to get proactive. You need to go to irs.gov under Get My Payment tool and make sure that you put in your banking account information. This is going to be very vital. And for people that are low income or homeless, they need to make sure to go to that portal as well to put in banking information so they can get their check.
Now, you could still get a paper check, right? You'd just be waiting a long time for it, right?
That is correct. Paper checks are going to be coming out. They will all have President Trump's name on it, so you'll make sure that it is authentic and aware. But yes, it is going to take a while for those checks to go out. I think those are supposed to begin to go out in early May.
I think a letter from you is going out with them too, saying don't waste this money, right?
Well, absolutely. If I could send everyone a note, I would tell them these checks are merely a Band-Aid, Neil. This is not going to solve anything. It's going to help keep food on the table and hopefully keep the lights on. But we've got to change our mental outlook here. We've got to begin to dig our heels in and understand that we've got to take care of what's going on in our home, let alone what's going on in the White House. So that means we've got to go into conserve mode. We've got to begin to be very clear on every dollar that goes out, be very intentional and protective of the money that you have. I'm advising people to take care of the four walls. We talk about this in the program that we offer, Financial Peace University. You want to take care of your housing, that's your rent or your mortgage, your utilities. Then you want to make sure that you have food on the table, and then your transportation is up and running. Anything outside of that needs to go on pause right now while we deal with this pandemic.
Chris Hogan, thank you very, very much, my friend. Chris Hogan on the latest there. Before I take you to these protests going on in Minnesota, we are getting word from the Friends of the Wall Street Journal of a possible breakthrough on this plan to get that $250 billion in added spending to the Paycheck Protection Program. That House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is open to the possibility of pairing hospital and small business funding to this as a possible breakthrough in these stimulus talks. Now that inevitably means, well, it's going to be a lot more than $250 billion, but it will satisfy some Democrats' call to expand this beyond small business to, in this case, hospital healthcare worker funding. So we'll let you know how that goes. Now I want to take you to Minnesota. This rings a bell with what scenes you've played out in like Michigan. This also involved protest against a governor who has some very strict stay-at-home policies. Now he's loosened those up a little bit to include folks going out, leaving their home, hunting, fishing, that sort of thing. But it's too little too late to a lot of these folks who, by the way, are violating distancing rules that are already in effect there. But they've had it. He either loosens up significantly or they don't go. So this played out in Michigan. It's playing out in a lot of states. There are extremes on this. Those who say, yeah, we want to be safe, but a lot of us also want to go back to work. And the two sides are not meeting each other. Stay with us.
And say that Donald Trump never made fun of disabled people. There is video of it. How in the world can you sit there and say with this?
That's a question. Let Charlie answer it, and then we're going to scoot. Charlie, go ahead and answer what John just said, and then we'll move on.
You show me the words where Donald Trump made fun of disabled people. He didn't. That's not the video that I guess you're talking about. Is the video where he mocks somebody something that he often used at the time to mock anybody that he was making fun of. He was not mocking somebody because they were disabled. He's an equal opportunity offender. He offends everybody.
That is true.
All right, we'll move on. Gentlemen, thank you very much. John, Charlie, good to see you both. The president is now saying getting back to business is up to the United States, the states. But some governors say he cannot just wash his hands of them. Ari Fleischer weighs in on how this may play out with the presidential election fewer than 200 days ago. There is Ari. If he moves, you'll know it's live.